I will admit a big reason I started this YouTube channel, well, one, I was bored with the COVID shutdown, but two, I wanted to promote my business, which is Spectra Creative. See, the name of the channel, also the name of my business. Check it out at spectracreative.com. I consult for inventors and toy companies looking to bring product to market and need help with branding. But in addition to that, I run this channel, and I'm really glad that I started it. While it did start off as a way to promote my business and alleviate boredom during COVID, having the comment section and the mail that I receive from viewers has been such a great way to dive back into just talking toys with people, which is part of, well, it's what I love the most. And I don't do that because I don't as much these days because I don't work on adult collector lines. I work on other toy projects. So one of the letters that I received recently from Earl asked me about who controls the specific look of a character, and he was asking about Spin Master and Todd McFarlane's DC line. Essentially, kind of to bottom line it, he wanted to know is who gets the final say. If Todd McFarlane wants to make an action figure in said scale and this or that version of a DC character, Batman from this comic or this storyline, does he just get to make it with the contract? Well, the short answer is it depends. There's a lot of ins, a lot of outs, tying this rug together. It really is about which licensor you're dealing with. And there's no one set rule, there's no one set strategy. Almost every single licensor, studio, IP owner that I've ever worked with, and they've all been fantastic. It's honestly, I feel very blessed that I've gotten to work with so many. They're all different. So I can kind of go over a few of them, and maybe that'll help answer the question. So with Ghostbusters, I worked on the Ghostbusters line on Matty Collector like 10 years ago now. Wow, it's scary how time flies. I got to work with Sony. Not only was it great because they were literally around the corner from Mattel, and we could drive there, unlike some other licensors that were either across the country or hours away. So we got to actually go to Sony Studios all the time and chat Ghostbusters. And yeah, they brought out the Ecto-1 and actually kind of, I didn't get to drive it around a lot, but they did let me sit in it. And yeah, it was the screen used one. It's pretty cool. They totally restored it. The guys at Sony Consumer Products are really passionate about Ghostbusters, which is awesome because when you work with people that are passionate, you get better stuff. And they were basically, make Ghostbuster toys. Let us know who you want to make, and we'll do everything we can to help you make that. And the challenge wasn't working with Sony. It was really the fact that all of the actors had approval rights for their figure, or for the likeness, the portrait. That's what the head sculpt is called, a portrait. So that actually became the limiter. The person who got the final say in this case wasn't the studio, but it was the actor, and you can guess which actor was a little bit harder to get approvals from. So that is why it took so long to get a Peter Venkman action figure in the line, because we needed to get Bill Murray to approve. I remember when I got Dan Aykroyd's approval and it had his signature on it. He wrote "This looks awesome!" ! And I kept it and put it on my wall because I'm like, oh, it's Dan Aykroyd's signature. So we finally actually had to track Bill Murray down on a golf course and bring him a box of Mattel Ghostbusters product and just other product. Be like, see, we want you in this line. And so we showed him the head, and he agreed. He actually rejected the first sculpt, and we had to resculpt his head. And that was a big reason why there was a delay. And we had to get a Walter Peck figure out before we even got one Peter Venkman. So our fourth figure in the line or fifth figure in the line, we hadn't even gotten all the Ghostbusters yet, and we were cranking out tertiary characters, which is why Walter Peck came with the containment unit. It was also because he lived on the same block as one of the Sony consumer product executives, so he was able to go to his house and knock on his door to get his approval, which was really cool. So continuing along the journey of how different studios and different content works with the approval process with Warner Brothers Consumer Products, who oversee a huge, vast, almost museum of IP. I mean, we're talking Lord of the Rings, Matrix, DC. I have to say, one of the huge highlights is working with this gentleman, Chaz Fitzhugh. He's not there anymore. He actually retired. But Chaz was totally a fanboy, like Bill Beneke, like myself. And working with him was how we were able to do so many cool DC things at Mattel. And the approval process was, we would take a first stab and send a B sheet showing all the characters we wanted to do, and then we would get notes. Warner would say, what if you do this figure? Could you release this one instead because it's going to be featured in this film or in this content or in the comic book? So we'd go back and forth, and we'd usually come to a nice compromise that would meet Mattel's needs to have main characters like Batman and Superman out, and tertiary characters for collectors, but also Warner Brother and DC Comics need to have certain characters out at certain times because they might be more relevant. Maybe they were going to appear on a TV show or in a TV commercial for M&Ms or something. I don't know. So they were, in fact, so appreciative of the hard work that the team did, and well, I guess personally for me, they allowed me to have a slot in the DC 6-inch line that I could just choose the figure without any, I guess I had the final say in this one single slot. So on the other end of the Irvine spectrum, you're going to have companies like Disney that are much more involved. And probably the most involved of all of the Disney sub-brands is Lucasfilm. With Lucasfilm, they basically, the toys are really viewed more as part of the content, as part of the Star Wars statement that is out there for the public. So Lucasfilm is much, much more involved versus a studio like Sony with Ghostbusters or DC, Warner Brothers with the DC superhero line. So with Lucasfilm, it's much more like they'll dictate who to do and when to do them, and basically say, okay, in this quarter, these are these figures need to come out. In this quarter, you can choose between these 9, and in this quarter, these 2 have to come out, and then you can choose between these 7. So, there was some obviously input from being on the toy company side, but I would say of all the licensors I worked with, Lucasfilm was the most involved. And I think one of the interesting ways to see this is when you see in quite a few lines, these are all Hasbro lines here, I've never worked for Hasbro, but the same character tends to show up in multiple scales at the same time, like Ceremonial Luke, or right now Bib Fortuna is in both the Vintage Series 3 3/4 and the Black Series 6-inch. So, obviously this happens quite often. The reason that it happens, that we get figures at the same time on shelf at the same scale, especially when they've got literally thousands to choose from, is Lucasfilm does know, kind of what's happening. So, they knew Luke's medal was going to be featured in Episode 9, but they couldn't allow Hasbro to make that Episode 9 moment yet because it needed to remain as a surprise. But they could get the medal out there in the form of Yavin Luke to tie it into that scene, or with, fat Bib Fortuna appearing in The Mandalorian. Lucasfilm knows that's happening. They may not be able to tell Hasbro, but they can say it would be a good idea to have Bib Fortuna out now. Obviously, they don't have access to the fat Bib Fortuna reference yet. We're talking pre it airing, but Lucasfilm will say Bib Fortuna should be out there, and that's why you see him out there twice. A few years ago, before Disney bought Lucasfilm, it was definitely much more the toy company's call, and I think that's why you saw a much wider selection of characters, especially during Dale the Priest's tenure on Star Wars. But once Disney owned Star Wars, it became much more of a corporate brand especially for Disney, and certain figures were no longer even going to be on the table. Others were going to be not just highly encouraged, but literally this is who you're doing. Okay, the last category is toys that are owned by the toy company. So G.I. Joe is a great example, created by Hasbro, owned by Hasbro. They bought back any rights that they may have gotten rid of over the years, so they can kind of do whatever they want. And they can include, at least they're the approval. So that's when you have the most freedom. And sometimes it's most enjoyable to work on a brand like that, or Hot Wheels, or Barbie. There's a great interview I did with Bobby Valla about a year and a half ago, where he actually outlined how Hasbro IP brands like G.I. Joe are deliberately plussed down, less parts, so that they don't overshadow licensed brands like Marvel and Star Wars. It's really interesting. I'll have a link to it at the end here, and actually that pretty much wraps it up. So check out the interview with Bobby below, and let me know if this resolved the questions you had about who handles approvals. It's different in lots of situations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.